We'll learn a piece of Dega Machne Ephraim. It's in Parshas Yisro. It's about Matan Torah. So we're going to learn the YAKOV'S Shavuot. It says, V'chol ha'omrim es ha'kolos v'salapidim. Klal Yisrael is standing by Mount Sinai and they're receiving a revelation. The truth is coming in. And they can see fire. They can see sound, which is an interesting concept that's discussed. How do you see sound? And this has to do with the nefesh being a unit that is not divisible. And therefore, who is the one that sees from inside my eyes? It's the same nefesh that hears from inside my ears, that smells from inside my nose. So physically, I have separate tools in order to convert the stimuli into the spiritual language that my spirit speaks. But once it gets converted, who does it go to? It goes to the same spirit. It goes to the spirit within that sees, hears, smells, tastes, and touches all together in one unit, in one place, and that's the spirit. The reason the spirit can only see and hear through the receptacles, the eyes and the ears, is because it's stuck in a body. When the spirit leaves the body, it doesn't need eyes to see. It sees without eyes. But when it's inside the body, then it is tied into the body in such a way that all the powers that it has are now being siphoned off into the body. It lost its own ability to be itself, to control its destiny fully. And now it's plugged into an organism where the different functions of the spirit are now being run by organs. So instead of the spirit being one united unit, where it's in the source, close to the source, now it's manifested into a body and it has multiple functions that are happening around it. And all these functions are together reporting to the spirit, which has the ability to convert this spiritual data into a meaningful experience. And so this is how we tie a spirit down from its tremendous magnificence, where it is in the upper realms, where it's more powerful than the archangels. We tie it down into a physical body where it seems to have no power at all, because all its powers are now invested inside the biology. Now it needs to study the biology from within. It needs to understand itself from the side of consciousness in order to be able to activate its powers, in order to be able to receive what would be naturally hers when she's outside of the body. And so now when they were going to realize the unity of the spirit and realize that not only is the spirit united within them as one spirit, but the spirit is united within all of us as one collective. So when they were coming to this realization, their individual spirits started separating from the bodies, started realizing that the spiritual is not really living tied to the body in order to receive life, but the opposite. The reason it's not fully alive is because it's in a body. If it wasn't in a body, it would be even more alive. So as they started realizing that, their unity, their life force, started clinging to that collective unity. And as they were being more present in their spirit than in their body, the senses started mingling with each other, as they could see sound and they could see the words that are coming from beyond into their minds and through their mouth into manifestation, into reality. So they were becoming more and more spiritual, and in the spiritual, the different forces unite because they come back to source. They come back to where they originally originated from. So they saw the koilos and the lapidim, vayinu vayamdim merochek, and they stood from a distance. Vayomer Moshe, they said to Moshe, Daber ata imanu, you speak with us, because it was too scary for them. It was too much. They couldn't handle the depth of the experience. The depth of the experience was so overwhelming that they completely lost their identity. They completely lost their ability to experience themselves as an individual. So they said to Moshe, you speak to us and let's hear it through you so that we don't die. Moshe said to them, Al tiroi, don't be afraid. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is coming to prove, to test you, to show your strength. He wants you to realize how real and how big is what you're interacting with. He wants you to know that it's bigger and more important than all the other details of life. And therefore, he wanted to make a big presentation so that when you have that experience, you know the seriousness of it. You know how real it is. So this is something that for all of us is important to realize, is that life is real. Life is very meaningful. And just because we don't have access to it, we might seem to think that whatever takes place is just passing by and then we can forget it. It's like it never happened. But the world is not built like that. The world is built very differently than the way we think it is. And the more we grow, the more our intelligence improves and evolves, we get to experience that life is more meaningful than what we previously thought it was. We don't get to experience how meaningful it is because we don't have enough brain capacity to ever experience that. But we get to experience enough to realize that as our brain is growing, life doesn't become easier and meaningless. Life becomes more deep and more complex. So that proves to us that as far as we might go, we will always find more depth and more reality to life. Life is that real. Life is that big. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu shows himself to Klal Yisrael, it changes their entire perception of reality, and they're left in traumatized. They're left afraid to face this reality because it's so big and it's so real. So it says, "Yesh b'zeh dvar mamikim fi ani izdarti," says the Degel. I'll say in short the deep subjects that he found in these psukim. It says, Ki yedua, it is known, if this wouldn't have taken place, this event we just described, where Klal Yisrael became afraid of what's about to happen, they became afraid of too much revelation. If they wouldn't have had that fear, they would have allowed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Creator, to reveal himself with all the 10 dibros on all the levels that he wanted to reveal himself in. So if this would have happened, Klal Yisrael would have been perfected, because the ability of a human being to explain content to another human being is limited to the intelligence of the person teaching. So words are very powerful. Words go in very deep into the heart of the person that listens. It actually changes how they perceive life. So it has a very deep impact on the spirit, on the spiritual. But the power of the impact and the ability to convert the person's heart from seeing life in a way that is false to seeing life in a way that is true is limited by the intelligence of the one that's giving over. And so if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Klal Yisrael something, it means that he takes responsibility to deliver. His words, when they leave, they don't come back empty. They do what they're meant to do. They actually make the mission, they take the mission all the way to the end until it's completed. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us these 10 principles, and these 10 principles are the underpinning principles of life, the underpinning principles of reality itself, because within these 10 principles, Klal Yisrael understood already all 613 mitzvahs. So really all the 613 are represented in these 10, and these 10 are represented in the one principle of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Meaning if somebody identifies the Creator correctly within creation, then he will logically understand all the mitzvahs that they need to be the way that they are. Not in their physical manifestation of how we do the mitzvahs today, but in the world of concept, in the world of perception. Why did we need some form of protection? Why did we need this information to be given over? In order to allow life to be the way that it needed to be. So all the 630 mitzvahs will be understood if we understand the 10 principles, which are the underlying principles of what a human being needs to know to understand himself. because these principles are involved in creation on every level. So when we understand these principles correctly, we can do no wrong, because a human being doesn't have an interest in doing wrong. A human being only does wrong when he misunderstands, when he doesn't realize truth, when he doesn't know in what way is he going to find peace. So then he gets into more and more conflict as he tries to create peace for himself. But when a person understands the principles of life appropriately, then he won't err, he won't make a mistake. His nature was designed correctly. His nature works with the proper information and never goes wrong. And this we can see physically, how when a body is in proper balance and it's not disturbed by any unnatural forces, it has continuous existence that just continues without any limitation. And in the past, people lived even longer for a certain period of time, which means that a lot more is possible with the experience that we're having. We're just not interested enough, so we sort of dry up at some point. Our body is not involved enough in life in order to keep us young, in order to keep our minds and our emotions in a healthy place so that we can have continuance. So the body in and of its nature is constantly renewing itself. And the spirit, if it would have the appropriate juice, the appropriate desire, it would give the body even more life than it currently does. So when a person realizes a certain truth, it means that he's exposing himself to reality. And when these people exposed themselves to reality that was too much for them, they wanted suddenly to hear it through somebody else. And that meant that the message is now not going to be delivered fully the way that it was intended to be delivered. And once they didn't receive the message fully, it means that now it's possible for something to go wrong. Now they don't really get the principles all the way to the core. Their principles are based on a tiny bit of relying on somebody else, on believing what they're being told. And in that area, they might err. In that area, they might make a mistake. And that's exactly what happened, that because they heard it through Moshe, so now a tiny bit of their belief was based on the fact that Moshe was saying it. They understood, and it was wisdom, and they knew how to live it, and everything was fine. But there was a little bit of idol worship in there, because it was through Moshe. It was through somebody else explaining it, and that was the experience. It wasn't direct. It wasn't the reliance that a person is supposed to have only on himself, not on a teacher, not on a messenger, not even on a decipher. Only on the Creator, on the purity of the undefined. Because only from there did he receive everything. He didn't receive everything from anywhere else. He received it directly from the undefined, and with the undefined is the relationship that we're trying to understand. And how do we interact with the undefined in a logical way, in a way that can be intelligent, that can assist wisdom? So when the undefined wanted to create man, when the undefined created each one of us as an individual, we are not based on the ultimate settings of a human being. Originally, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the individual units, he created a prototype of what a perfect man would look like. Now, that perfect man is what we're all trying to become. That perfect human that HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed the world for, that's what we want to be. And that's the middle point between the infinite, the one that created life, the one that created everything, and the individual that we are. The individual that we are is not in accordance with the prototype exactly. The individual that we are has many areas where the prototype would behave differently. The ultimate human would behave differently. So in order for us to come close to the infinite that created us, we want to try to understand from within our nature what is the ultimate human that this world was designed for. And that's what Yisrael represents. Yisrael Olah B'machshava means that Yisrael is the prototype of what a human being is supposed to look like in the eyes of the designer, in the eyes of the creator. And that's what a human being is supposed to come to. So when Klal Yisrael was in a mind frame of slavery, they were in a mind frame of moichen dekatnis, of thinking small, of thinking that they don't deserve, of thinking that they're not good enough. and suddenly they got taken to a level where they realized that it's all for them and they have all the power and everything that they do matters. They couldn't live up to that prototype. They couldn't meet the infinite halfway. They couldn't realize what is really within their best interest to be and become that. And so when they took it through Moshe, they relied on Moshe's greatness. They relied on Moshe's ability to comprehend the message and to receive it through there. And that meant that when Moshe disappeared, they lost their connection. They lost their ability to see truth. They lost their ability to realize that they are still safe, that their safety didn't come from Moshe. Moshe was just explaining to them what was real without Moshe. And so when they lost access to that, then they were open to whatever happened next. And that meant that the Torah couldn't be anymore the relationship directly with the undefined. The Torah now had to be a defined relationship, because the people proved through their maneuvering, through their saying, we don't want to hear directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have to hear through Moshe, and then by listening to Moshe as Moshe and not realizing that Moshe is the messenger from beyond, that Moshe is not the one that they should be worshipping. So they lost access to the purity of the original message. And then evil can come in already. If we rely on anything else, if we rely on any force, on any power, on any person, on anything, that thing, that symbol, is going to cause us a lot of damage as we try to protect it, as we try to take life from something that's impermanent, from something that cannot give us security, for something that cannot go with us to where we need it. It's only the undefined, the infinite, the source of all, that goes with us wherever we go, that goes with us in all situations and all circumstances, whether we're suffering or we're having pleasure, or life is good, life is bad, we're waiting for something, we're after something, we're disappointed. In all scenarios, in all situations, the undefined life force is there. Without him, we have no experience. Without him, nothing happens. So Klal Yisrael wasn't ready to create this relationship directly with the undefined. They weren't mature enough. They didn't feel secure. They didn't feel safe. And then they were open for all kinds of problems. Things could now go wrong because they weren't hooked in to that unconditional commitment to life. So if they wouldn't have, they never would have had sin. They said, speak you with us, and we're not ready for the direct connection. That the Moshe suddenly, he went from being a mashpia, from directing Klal Yisrael, to how they're going to receive the ultimate redemption. Now suddenly he was in a situation where he was the one receiving from above and he's giving over. Now it's going to go through somebody else, going to go through a Keil Sheni. And that changes the message. That changes the power of the message. From the Baal Shem Tov, when somebody learns directly from a righteous person, it's different than if he's learning it through somebody else. Because when we learn, we create a connection nefesh to nefesh. The spirits bond through learning, through understanding. So when we speak, it brings the spirits to a location in the spiritual world that is combined, that is the collective of all the people that are listening. So right now, together, all of us, we're creating a collective spirit by thinking of the same words at the same time. And this has a tremendous power. So when somebody's learning directly from a tzaddik, it means that his soul is bonding with the soul of the tzaddik. So in that bonding, there's an interaction that gives over information that is more subtle than simply the information that's coming through in the words. So when somebody receives it from somebody else already, then he's not receiving the subtle message, he's just receiving the words. And so it has a very different impact on the spirit. So it says, if somebody is learning directly from the Creator, obviously that means that his soul, his spirit is bonding with the ultimate source. So that means that his inspiration is going to be on levels of subtlety that is unimaginable to us. That his teaching would make an impact on the students, and they would have completely transformed into the type of being that he wants to create. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself is alive and the things that he says live and stay forever. Ken hoya etzat talmidim, the same thing would have happened to the students, that as he taught them the principles of life, they would have been ingrained so deeply into the spirit of the people that it would never leave, it would never falter. They would live for eternity, it would never would have gone away. Once they heard it from Moshe, so of course Moshe made a big impact, but the fact that it was Moshe making the impact already changed the nature of the message and the depth of how deep it can go. He said, we need to understand the first two dibros, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the creator, and you shouldn't have any other gods, you shouldn't have any other forces, you shouldn't have any other things that are more important to you than your spirit, than the spiritual. So these two, they heard directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Ma'ayin Holam Loimar Daberat Timon Shlish Min Pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it says, how did they come up with this request? Didn't they just hear that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Anoich Hashem Elokecha, I'm it, there's nothing else. And then he said, Lo yilecha aleim achayim, you shouldn't have any images, you shouldn't have any concepts. Obviously, you shouldn't have any people. You shouldn't have anything that stands between you and your connection to life. You can't rely on anything for this connection. So how would they, after listening to such an instruction directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we just said that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu speaks, we listen. There's no way that they didn't understand what he was saying. How can they come after such two dibros and say, Daber atimon, we want to listen to the Moshe? Didn't they understand what was being said? Didn't they understand the message? You're not allowed to rely on anything else. Your answer is only directly from the source. There is nothing else. There could be nothing else that will help you. Everything is just the face of the source. Everything is a face of the same intelligence that created you. So where are you looking? Where are you going to go search? Did the one that created Moshe is not the same one that created the rest of you? So how did they err? How did they make such a mistake? So he says the people got distracted because they were going through such an elevated event. So as they started experiencing all these different distortions, as they started seeing life from all these different angles, they found that amusing. They found that even more amusing than what was being said. Their mind was distracted by the event, and the words didn't interest them enough. Very few actually looked directly at the source and had the understanding of what's the most important part of this experience. Where do I need to focus? Where should my attention be while this is happening? And so each one saw it from a different angle. That's why it was possible for them to say afterwards, we don't want to listen, is because in the beginning they didn't fully listen. In the beginning they weren't fully there. That's why they stood in the distance, they stood far away. It became a separation between them and the Creator. Don't be afraid. HaKadosh comes to raise you, to test you. So it says, Nasos is Lashon Harama, to raise you up. He's coming here to bring you up to a very high level, so you're never going to make a mistake again. Just like he can live for eternity, you will also be able to live like that. You will always be complete. You will always know what behavior is required of you. You will always know what is within your real nature and what will not offend the nature of humanity and the nature of your Creator and what He created. So when a person is in that state, when a person can be that ultimate prototype of a human being that the Creator created for us to be, so then he's complete. He's always complete. He never suffers. So because they were separated from that message, because they weren't ready to absorb that message, it seemed overwhelming to them. It seemed like having a relationship with the Creator was too big for them. So they missed the entire point. They missed the entire message. The message is that nothing can be too big on you. This is what you were created for. This is what you were designed to be. You were designed to be big. You can only be too small. Being too small means that you've restricted yourself to being something you're not. And now you're struggling. Now you're trying to become something you're not, and it's not working out. But to be what you were created to be, that's the most natural. So why would they run away from something that is their natural state? It's only because they were distracted in the Chatchila. They weren't understanding the message appropriately. They weren't realizing the depth of the message, that it's all encompassing, that there's nothing else, that there's no other possibility. So, ויש בזה עוד רמז עומק והבאה בקיצור נמרץ, כי איסה, אנוכי is the Rosh Hashanah, ano nafshi kazvus yovis. I'm giving my soul in writing. That's what the word means. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to Klal Yisrael, I'm giving you my soul. How am I giving you my soul? Because I'm explaining to you how the world works. I'm explaining to you the soul of the world. If you know the soul of the world, then you can control the world. So he's literally giving you the keys to the kingdom. He's giving you control of the soul of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the collective soul. V'hu soid ha-nefesh. What is he giving you? He's giving you the secret of the nefesh. What is the secret of the nefesh? The secret of the nefesh is that thing that speaks out of your mouth is an extremely, extremely powerful thing. It's so powerful that you're totally not qualified to have it. And yet he gave it to you. And to me, and to everybody else. Because he is so powerful, he's so big, and he's so wise, that it doesn't matter what mess we're going to make, he's going to know how to fix it. So therefore, he gave us power, because he wants us to learn. He wants us to become something. So he's giving us this nefesh. This nefesh can run this world. And where do we see it? We see it in Moshe, for example. Because Moshe had a nefesh like we have. Same thing. He had the same piece. But he knew how to use it in a way where he took control of life itself. He took control of the entire cosmos. Everybody was singing to his tune. Because that's the power of the intelligence that resides within you. But the first step to taking control of the cosmos is to take control of your own cosmos. Your own cosmos are your own organs, your own limbs, your own body, your own feelings, your own emotions, your own thoughts. First we have to learn how to run that. And once we know how to run that, we can realize how running that interacts with running everything else. Because it's all the same forces. It's all the same koiches. Everything is running on the same system, the same energies, the same language, same frequencies. So as we become familiar with ourselves, and we get to know how our nefesh resides within this body, and it runs itself from within this body, we realize how the collective nefesh, how the big nefesh, runs within the world, gives life to the world. So this is the soid ha-nefesh, the secret of the nefesh, the power of a human spirit and what it can do. Within the nefesh, soid ha-ruach va-neshama. Inside the nefesh, there's the ruach, the spirit, that can think and feel. And there's the neshama, the very intelligence that created your body, that created your organs, that's thinking within your mind, trying to understand itself. So these are within the nefesh, within that life force that lives within a human. There are deeper intelligences that are available to be manifested. Like the Baal Shem Tov said, where it says in the Taiva, beside Tachtim Shniim Shlishim Taseh, that the Taiva was made 3 levels. So the 3 levels indicate that the human body, which is like the taiva, has inside of it 3 different levels of life. The nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. So that's the secret explanation of why the taiva had 3 different levels. Kani besod nefesh, ruach, and neshama v'haven. Beferish Omar, the Baal Shem Tov would say, levakesh me'oisius, that if you need something, ask the letters. Ask from the letters that they should help you. That inside the letters, inside the vibrations of sound with which we create, are the light of energy, the light of divine energy that creates life, is hidden within these vibrations. It's hidden within these sounds. So he says, "Levakesh misham," and ask from there. Ask from there for what you need. Ask from that intelligence that manifests into letters, into those vibrations, because it's that intelligence that created all the combinations of humans, all the combinations of bodies, all the combinations of the different plants and animals that exist. are combinations of these energies that we call letters. So ask from them and let that intelligence give you what you need. This is the purpose of creating a man with the Torah and the mitzvahs. This is what it means, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah is whole, and it returns the soul. It unites the soul. It brings the soul back into a place of comfort. And that's when we can gain access to the soul. That's when the soul will listen to us, and our imagination can go to the places where the secrets can be revealed. This means learning in order to heal the soul, in order to heal the soul within humanity, the soul within each one of us. That is one big soul. There is one soul that lives in all of us. And this is how we communicate. So right now we're creating this united soul between all of us as I speak, and all of us are listening. So all of us are united in that soul that we're creating. And that collective soul that we create is going to influence our individual soul in order to make it more like itself. And so this is the nature of the soul. This is the nature of the spirit. This is how the spirit works. So this is the purpose, is to bring back peace within the collective soul so that we can all have access to a peaceful nefesh. So the whole globe has one big peaceful nefesh surrounding it. And that's called Torah Lishma, Torah to heal the soul that's within the creation. If Klal Yisrael would have listened to the source of what's being said, instead of being distracted by all the unusual effects, that if they would all be together united as they would listen to this reality, it means that they would give reality to this belief in a way that it could never change. And this we are capable to do until this very day. That if we will unite and together we will believe, then this will become the reality in all the worlds. This is the power of humanity. Humanity has the power to change how the universe runs in certain respects. But for that we need to learn how to use our intention, and even more importantly, we need to learn how to unite. We need to learn how to become one. We need to learn how to use our spiritual power. So in the ancient world, where there were very few people on the planet, so each individual and small groups had a lot of power on the big collective. Today, when there's so many people, we need even more unity in order to allow us access into the spiritual powers of creation. So as long as we're all conflicted, as long as we're all going in our own paths and have our own beliefs that don't correlate, so then we're going nowhere. Spiritually, the world doesn't have any spiritual power. So the spiritual power can only come back through the intelligence that's going to learn how to unite humanity, how to make us into a unified spirit, a spirit that wants to work together and believe together and create together and change together and evolve together, because that's what's necessary. As long as we don't have that ability, then we're stuck in a framework, we're stuck in a setup that's outdated, that doesn't really live, it's not alive, it doesn't have the ability to adapt to the level of intelligence and sophistication that humanity needs it to have. So this is only going to happen when humanity knows how to unite and care for each other and care about each other and care about each other's feelings, so that we can all have it better. So if we unite and we create a reality, that reality becomes permanently ingrained within the collective. And that reality remains, just like on an individual level. When we think something and we decide something or we experience something, it becomes etched into our nefesh and it becomes a reality of our nefesh. The same on the collective level. On the collective level, as we realize, we actually create realities that live on, that exist in the spiritual world. So if they would have had it like that, then it would have lasted forever. They were busy with other things. They were busy with the angels. Once you get busy with angels, once you get busy with manifestations, then some of them are good and some of them are not good. Some of them you want and some of them you don't want. And that's where everything gets confused. That's when we get involved in the But tzaddikim, those people who did have the brains, who did have the intelligence to know, to look for that source, to look for that truth, and those people, they did receive permanent life. And the things that they say will exist, will happen. Like it says, so when a person like that says something, so then it will really happen, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still with that person from that moment when he saw the proper Anoichi, when he understood who this Anoichi is, who he's really serving. From that moment he received life, and going forward, everything that he says, everything that he does, everything that he thinks is tied to that life, is tied to that reality, and therefore it has power in the spiritual world. So we should be zoche, that we should be able to realize this Anoichi, to realize this depth of connection that we have to reality, to what's taking place in this world. And we should be able to tap into our true power and be mekabel the Torah b'shleimus, and be zeichet to the Gula Shleima, so we can have cheres olam, eternal freedom. Questions? You have a question? Go.
So like we all have the same soul in a way.
Yeah.
So how are we different? Like I'm saying personalities and
body, because we write down, first we have the settings of a body. So the question is, if we all have the same soul, because we're all one soul really, so how are we different in personality and behavior? And the answer is that when we're born, our body receives its texture from the stars, from where the stars are located, in accordance with the mazolas, in accordance with the astrological signs. And that means that we have different balances of elements. So some person is more fiery, and some person is more earthy, and some person is more emotional, like watery, or intellectual, like air. So these balances go into all our organs in multiple combinations. So it ends up being that none of us are similar exactly in the content of our body, in the texture of how it feels to be inside of our body, and therefore how our organs are going to make us interact with life. So that's the first place where we create differentiation. On top of that, the experience of the parents creating the child also creates a screen, also creates a lens, how the spirit is going to look at life and experience life. And then we have the experiences themselves that we went through in this lifetime and another lifetime. So all these things mean that it's this one undifferentiated spirit, when it comes into these vessels, looks very different from all the different angles. So we're all seeing different aspects of that same being. And the aspects that we're seeing is based on that interaction between the undefinable spirit that can be everything, as it comes into these vessels, which are the definitions created by the body and by the spiritual angels of the past, by the experience. So this is why we're all different. But essentially we represent that same one. It's like one big spirit that lives in humanity. It's that one prototype that's trying to become himself through us. And eventually he's going to realize himself, and then he's going to have all that power.
So really, in true essence, we're all the same soul.
We're all one soul. Yeah, we all have one collective soul. That's what it means. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, is that we want to realize together the unity of our soul, so that we don't direct our effort, our energy, to an individual good at the expense of the collective good. We want to direct our energy at what's ultimately good for the collective, because together as a collective we can build infinite good for ourselves. As an individual, it's very limited, the good we can do for ourselves. We're usually going to end up causing ourselves a lot of trouble. But as a collective, there's no limit to how good we can make ourselves feel. So only when we'll be able to work in that direction, where that will be our ultimate priority, then will that goodness start building in a way that nobody will ever have to go looking for good. It will come, it will find them. The collective will make sure that everybody that's born into it is taken care of in that way.
So there's no such thing as uniqueness?
Uniqueness is still there because of, like we said, the vessels. The vessels make us unique. So each one can add something that somebody else couldn't add. And that's what makes it so important to develop each one, because everyone that's not developed is a lost opportunity, not only for themselves, but for humanity as a whole. Humanity lost access to one aspect of realizing itself, to one way of seeing what it really means to be here. because that spirit didn't want to sing. That spirit didn't feel like singing, so we don't know what her song was. So it's our job to make sure that everybody feels like singing, so everybody shares what's inside, what's really, what's at the core of their message of what life means to them. And when we all compare notes like that, when we can all be open like that and safe and vulnerable, that's when really the flower can open up. That's when we can really be ourselves. We can really see what that gift feels like.
Does a Jew have a different soul than a Goy?
The soul is accessible in a Jew in a way that it's not as accessible, because it requires certain beliefs and a certain knowledge, a certain wisdom, in order to develop the relationship that we're looking for with the soul. And for this relationship, for this interaction specifically, was designed Lashon HaKodesh. So the Holy Tongue was designed not to speak to others, not to speak externally, but to create a proper communication between the intelligence that's trying to live and the mind that's trying to think and know itself through thinking, through understanding, through realization. So this language is what links us to our neshama in a way that others don't have access. So whatever we're going to find is going to be limited to the language that we have of realizing it, the language that we have of developing it. And so there's a wisdom that was available, that was known in a time at a certain time on this planet, that has been lost. And we have a tradition that connects us to that gives us access to that language that allows our neshama to communicate with us. Yeah.
After Klal Yisrael heard the first two of the so they heard directly from the source, as was mentioned, that once you hear straight from the source, then there's no
can't go wrong.
Right,
yeah.
So there's no room for
error.
And so what happened to them was that they understood, which means that understanding still exists
to a certain degree.
To a certain degree. So that wasn't lost because they heard that. So it was just that they made a decision then, was that this understanding is way too over.
So that's what he's saying, that the only reason they came to that conclusion is because they weren't focused properly to listening. So even though he was delivering a message and the message got delivered, they're being distracted while he was delivering the message by the semantics of how different their consciousness was from usual. So they got distracted, and therefore they couldn't realize how much the message is comforting to them. They didn't fully realize.
So it was limited still for their ability, even if
it was limited from.
Why was there any room for any kind of?
Because he can deliver the message to your heart to make sure that you understand what is being said, but how you receive it is always up to you. So if the person is not focused on what's being said, even though he understood what's being said, he still didn't feel the comfort that he was supposed to feel while it was being said, and therefore it pulled them back a little. They didn't feel like they're being hugged. They felt more like they're being intimidated. You understand? But if they would have focused on the words Anoichi and thought, Anoichi, like that's the ultimate hug, that's the ultimate kiss that you can receive from the Creator, is where he says to you, you and I, we're buddies, we're okay, we're the same thing. I have nothing against you, you have nothing against me. That's the ultimate hug that you can receive. But because he's so lofty, their minds were still stuck in small-mindedness of slavery, of, wow, really, I'm free? Really, I can do whatever I want? Instead of really hearing what's being said. And so that caused that later on, when they were supposed to go in deeper into this relationship, they weren't necessarily ready. They didn't receive the sustenance that they were supposed to receive out of those statements.
And what was that fear that, like, why do we have to be free to hear Hashem? Like, you're saying if we accepted and heard him, we would have not have needed the Torah or anything. We would have already probably had, sounds like Olam Haba. Like,
right? It would be like Mashiach came already. Yeah.
So, like, what was it that, like, what was that fear? Like, what was that?
Because it's very big, it's so good, it's like a person is not ready to realize that things are so good. His body has been so used to compensating for the bad that when he suddenly realizes that there's really, 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 really no issue, that he couldn't handle it. It felt like they lost their identity. They didn't have any identity outside of their suffering and their pain and their slaving and their doing. And suddenly they realize, no, this is not life, this is not the world, this was just an illusion. These Egyptians, they just pulled the rug over your eyes. This wasn't even real. You're fine, you were always fine. And like a body that's been through suffering has a difficulty with the clash, that the nervous system can't take it. So suddenly it gets extremely confused. It gets confused, like, so what am I supposed to feel? What am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? And so this takes a certain maturity to be able to digest such a big message. And because of what they went through, they weren't raised in comfort, they weren't raised in pleasantness where their relationship with reality was healthy. So their relationship couldn't handle it. Their body and their spirit just couldn't go together on this one.
So like Hashem knew that, so like why does he test us like now?
This is just part of the process of realization. It's not really a story where we say, it should have happened this way, it should have happened that way. When it happened already, we know what should have happened. It should have happened exactly like it did because this was how it played out. So this means that this was the ultimate plan. We're just saying, so that we understand what took place, we're saying that they were this close to having it perfect and yet they weren't ready. But at the end of the day, what's the big message? They weren't ready. That's it. It doesn't really matter if they got an inch or got it wrong by a mile. It wasn't close enough, and therefore we're still where we are. We didn't suddenly find out that thousands of years ago we really got redeemed already. We really were born into Galus. We really have to go through this. We really have to realize. But on different times, we can see that people they flirted with the redemption. They got very close. So we should realize that it's within our nature. It's not something that's very distant. It's something that's achievable. We just have to apply ourselves in the right way and we can have it. He wants us to have it. That's why it was made. That's why we were made. We won't realize ourselves in any other way.
But in their high level, they couldn't handle it, right? What makes it, I don't know, I just like, how can I...
Because it's a different circumstance.
Lower,
it's a different circumstance.
if I'm put up to the,
Right. It doesn't look like that today.
How will I really be just not like, how would I handle insane?
Because we're not coming from slavery. We're not coming from where they're coming from. We're not living in a world that's so violent. We're not in their situation. So our nefesh doesn't look at life the way that theirs did. And they were running from something, and they were really running from something. We're not running from anything. So we're just realizing that we were supposed to run from anything in the first place. So we're not in the same game, and it's been designed that it should work. We say all these nice stories just so that we can realize how this thing works, so that we can actually do it. That's the goal. It's not because we want to cry that it didn't happen then. It's because we want to do it. So we learn all about it. We learn what other people did. We learn how they get it wrong, so that we can not fall for the same pitfall, so we cannot make the same mistakes. But ultimately it will happen. There's no other choice. Humanity was created only for this purpose. They weren't created to build buildings and to be busy. That's not the purpose. So it won't last.
Tell us what our focus is supposed to be over Shavuot. Like, what are we supposed to be? We're supposed to be like open to receiving intelligence, realizing that many years ago, HaKadosh Baruch Hu actually revealed on some level the nefesh of humanity was ready to receive a message from that beyond, from that place that is beyond what we're used to interacting with, from a place that's more real, that's more true. So we want to make ourselves very familiar with this fact that there is a reality, even though it looks like there isn't, even though it looks like everybody is just making it up and everybody's doing whatever they want. There is an underlying truth, and the proof is that at some point in history people had access to it. So this is really the message of Shavuot, is that Matan Torah means that certain people knew things about life that if only we knew would solve all our problems. And this is something that is ingrained in all the holidays. Yetzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Adin. All these things are beyond where they're telling us on a specific level that the world works like this or the world works like that. We're not even up to that detailed level. First, we have to register the big level message. Somebody created life. There's a logic to how it works. When something hurts, there's a reason to why it hurts. There's a reason to how it played out and why it played out and what took place and what didn't take place. So all this is inherent
in any message that's coming from the Torah, regardless of what it's saying. First, we have to be able to digest this fact, because it's a very big fact, it's a very big deal. It can take many lifetimes to digest. Somebody really created us, somebody really designed this, somebody really knows how thoughts work and how they affect you biologically, and what the consequences are going to be when we think, and what we're going to say because we thought that, and what we're not going to say because we thought that, and how that's going to affect the people that it should have been said to or should have not been said to. All these things have a reality. So that respect, as long as we don't have that respect, any message that we're going to receive is not going to have a good vessel where to live in. We don't understand how serious it is yet. We don't understand what we're dealing with. So that's the first level, is opening up to the reality that this is meaningful. This is a big deal. Everything that happens here is going to mean something to me at some point down the line, and I'm going to know what it means, and that truth is what I'm going to live with for eternity. So it's a very big deal before we even get to the details of what's being said, and that's Shavuot. Shavuot is the celebration of the message, that there is a message. And so we want to open ourselves up to that, and this is why on Shavuot night we learn to prepare for Kabbalah Torah, meaning we prepare ourselves to know how meaningful this is, so that we can receive, so that at least we have a vessel, we have some type of seriousness, we have some type of a respect for what's taking place. As long as we don't have that respect, then what's going to take place is not going to be that meaningful. It's not going to be that big. It's not going to blow us away, because we're not ready to be blown away. We haven't realized what we're dealing with, what we're interacting with. We're interacting with dynamite, but when we don't realize it, then we're just playing with it as if it's a game. We don't realize that, people lose fingers. People can gain eternity. It's a big deal. It's very serious. It's live as we're interacting with it. Which letters can we meditate on Shavuot's connections to access in a deeper way the connection of the physical body to the metaphysical body? So the relationship between the body and the spirit is the Shem Havaya, the name. The name of JUDAISM In is the name of that relationship between spirit and matter, because that relationship is what we're trying to design in order to allow spirit to find comfort in matter, in order to allow spirit to want to reside within matter, to enjoy that experience. So when we think about that code, right, which has the ultimate meaning, if there's ever a word in the world that has meaning, that word has the most meaning of all words. It's the word that people have directed their attention at and tried to figure out for generations, for centuries, for millennia. So within that word, the most basic level is the four elements, because the four elements don't only create our body. The four elements create every level of existence, going up all the way to the original manifestation. So we have the four levels in our body that represents the basic elements that constitute our body. This is how our body could work. Then when we go up into the level of the nefesh, in the level of the life force, so then we have what the ancients would call the four leiches, the four moistures that are inside the body. So this is the mora shchoire, they call it the black mora, that comes from the tchoil, from the spleen, and they have the mora levona, the film, I think it's called, that lives inside our body and controls also our hormones and our moods. Then there's the blood itself, and then there's a mora aduma, the red one, comes from the liver. So with these moras is how the nefesh controls its own balance between the four elements. The nefesh, the thing that lives inside the body, has a balance that's not physical, that's already close, that's we can call the emotional body, that lives in these juices, that lives in these chemicals that get released by the different organs. So there again we have the four elements. Then we go up into the emotional level itself, and then again we have the four elements. We have the different parts of our emotions. What are we feeling? So what we're feeling can also be separated into these four. And then we go to the intellectual, and the intellectual also has its elements. And here we're interacting with the malachim, with the underlying forces that create our psychological experience. And then we go in the level of desire, and then we go to the levels that are completely void of the physical, that are completely in the dimensions of the mind, in the dimensions of perception. And there again, we find the elements, all the way up to the Shem Havaya, to the original manifestation of life. And this also we have, for example, in the divine attributes, we have the elements in Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the Avos, which are representing 3 of the elements. And David, which is the Ofar, which is the lowest element, he represents the fourth leg of the chariot, the regular Vish of Merkava. So this Merkava, these 4 legs, they again represent the 4 elements. And these 4 elements are also represented in the chariot when we speak about man and lion, ox, and eagle. So these are the 4 personalities, so to speak, the 4 archetypes that are included within man, and these relate again to the 4 elements that are designing everything, that are bringing together everything. So this 4 is internal in all. So when we want to relate to our very nature, when we want to relate to source, so we go to these 4 letters. We can also correlate these letters to our breathing, where the Yud is where we take in air, the Hey is where we hold, the Vav is release, and the Hey is hold again. So this cycle relates also to the 4 elements and to the 4 seasons and to everything 4 within nature. So this relationship can be celebrated by meditating on these letters, by connecting to these letters, and realizing how symbolically the mind attaches associations to letters, and through that we speak to the soul. Through that we awaken within the soul the truth that's already there, the truth that's already dormant, that is so powerful, that is so meaningful, that is so pleasurable. And through words we can awaken that desire, we can awaken that force that's waiting to be experienced, that was created to be experienced, so that we can fully feel ourselves, so that we can fully exist, so that we can fully know that we are in contact with the true life force, and we are comfortable with that life force, that we are enjoying its presence, that we want to be in existence exactly in the way that we're experiencing it, exactly with all the details that we have. So that relationship with the letters brings all these forces back into the present moment, because that's the meaning of the word. The meaning of the word is existence. So the Shem Havaya means that there is an intelligence that exists now. That's the message of Yud Hoive. Hoive means present. So there's a Yud. Yud represents the intelligence of the 10 spheres, of the 10 sfirot, of the 10 divine intelligences that interact, and they create the present, not the past. And this power, that if we can bring in from the intelligence directly into the present, then we're not serving the past. If we're not connected to this power, then automatically our mind is recreating from the past. Automatically our mind is tied into all these different structures that limit its power, that don't allow it to be fully itself. So this name, like I said, it has infinite understanding, infinite knowledge, and in fact the entire Torah comes only to teach us this name. The entire language comes to teach us this name, because the real meaning of this name can only be experienced, it can't be explained. And that experience is the experience that is beyond any limitation. That's why it's called Nachlas Yakov. Nachlas Yakov is called Nachle Bli Mitzorim. It's the name that Yaakov Avinu inherited when he got the name Yisrael, and it doesn't have any limitations, it doesn't have any restrictions, because it's direct access to source, direct access to the Ratzon that creates life itself. And from that Ratzon, there's such a strong desire to create, there's such a strong desire to become, that it can overcome any boundaries, it can overcome any limitations, inside the person or outside. And it's through that name that these people, the patriarchs and Moshe Rabbeinu and the prophets, through knowing that name, they became who they were. by understanding the real meaning of that name, they became who they turned out to be, the ones that we got to know. So the only reason their lives were so meaningful, the only reason they got to make a mark thousands of years later so that we can be talking about them, is because of their relationship with the real meaning of this name. Not simply with the letters, but with the real meaning of what does this name really mean? Who is it referring to? And we can say the word, it's referring to the spirit that lives in all spirits. But what's the experience of that? What does that mean? And that can only be experienced when a person could be quiet. Because Baruch Hu can't speak when we want to speak. When we are speaking, we're using all our channels to create for ourselves, for what we think is important. As soon as we're quiet, the intelligence beyond ours can reveal to us what it thinks is important. And obviously what it thinks is important is the only thing that's important. So this name is at the core of the entire spiritual system, of the entire wisdom. Everything in the wisdom was built in order to reveal and conceal this name at the same time.
Is Hashem like crowning us like on Shavuot? Is he giving us the Torah over again? Like, is that also happening?
So everything that happens in time constantly happens again each time that we pass that place in the cycle, because there's an association. So for example, if something happens to you with a specific person, if you have an experience with a specific person, every time you're going to see that person, you're going to wake up that history, that experience. Same thing with a place. You had to experience a certain place. Every time you go to that place, it wakes up that experience. So the same thing in time. It happens in Olam and Shona and Nefesh, in space, in time, and in consciousness. So when time comes again to that time of year, again we're going to experience an awakening of an association. And when an association awakens, it means that we're more prone to an experience of a similar emotion, of a similar meaning, or anything that wakes up with it. So when it wakes up in space, when it wakes up in time, or when it wakes up when you see a person that reminds you, all these are going to make an experience more likely and more meaningful.